In the whiteout above Red Mercy, an overturned animal trailer was slowly sliding toward the ravine. Cole Maddox thought every dog had been rescued until a faint scratching came from behind a sealed steel wall. Inside, a pregnant German shepherd lay frozen and exhausted, guarding an old K9 collar marked with one name, Bram. That name led Cole toward a remote quarry where 21 retired working dogs had vanished from official records. But saving them would take more than courage. It would force an entire town to decide whether compassion was worth the cost of speaking up. And for a man who had spent years walking away from grief, one mother dog was about to teach him what it meant to stay. Tell us where you're watching from, share your thoughts below, and please like and subscribe to help us reach 5,000 subscribers and keep these stories alive. In winter, Red Mercy did not look like a town built by human hands. It looked carved from light. Snow rested along the pitched roofs and pine-covered slopes in clean, brilliant layers, reflecting the pale Montana sun until every window and frozen gutter seemed edged in silver. On clear mornings, the surrounding mountains rose blue and sharp beyond the valley, and smoke from chimneys climbed so straight into the air that the town appeared to be holding its breath. But after dark, when the wind came down through Granite Mercy Pass, beauty became something colder. The snow stopped falling in recognizable flakes. It moved sideways in hard white sheets, erasing road markers, fence posts, and the distance between one danger and the next. Locals called it a white wind because a person caught inside it could lose every direction except fear. Cole Maddox had driven through worse. That was what he told himself as his rust-streaked pickup crawled along the mountain road, its headlights reflecting uselessly against the storm. He leaned forward over the steering wheel, broad shoulders filling his canvas work jacket, his green-gray eyes following the faint interruptions in the snow where the road ought to be. At 53, Cole still carried the disciplined stillness of his years in the Navy SEALs, though very little else about him looked military at first glance. His ash-brown hair had grown long enough to brush his collar, silver gathering above his ears. A few days of dark, graying stubble sharpened the long lines of his face. Beneath the jacket, the camouflage sleeves of an old combat shirt showed at his wrists, and the faded edge of a trident tattoo disappeared beneath the right cuff. He had spent most of the evening repairing a failed generator at a ranch 12 miles beyond town. The rancher had offered him dinner and a bed until morning. Cole had declined both. He always declined. His house waited at the edge of Red Mercy, beside an abandoned military supply garage, a low cedar building surrounded by snowdrifts and quiet. There were no lights left on for him, no second vehicle in the drive, no one who would worry if the pass closed before he returned. That arrangement had once felt temporary. After Helen Crowe died during a failed extraction overseas, and after Mercer, the military dog who had worked beside Cole, survived only long enough to be carried from the blast site, silence had become easier than explanation. Years later, when Evelyn died after 17 months of cancer treatments, even silence began to feel crowded. So Cole had made his life smaller. Machines were useful that way. A damaged snowplow did not ask why he had missed Christmas dinner. A generator did not notice unanswered letters. A frozen engine required heat, pressure, patience, and the correct tool. It did not need hope. The shape in the road appeared so suddenly that his foot moved before thought. Cole eased the truck sideways, tires biting through packed snow as he brought it to a controlled stop. 30 yards ahead, yellow hazard lights flashed through the white darkness. A livestock-style trailer lay on its side against the downhill guardrail. One wheel still turned. Cole reached for the radio clipped near the dashboard, but a county patrol vehicle was already parked at an angle across the road, its red and blue lights staining the snow. A deputy stood beside it, waving him down with both arms. Cole pulled on his gloves and stepped outside. The wind hit him like a thrown door. Snow immediately caught in his hair and beard. He lowered his head and moved toward the deputy, boots finding traction by habit rather than sight. "Transport van lost the curve," the deputy shouted over the storm. He was young enough that the ice on his eyelashes looked strange against his unlined face. "Driver's conscious. Rescue team's 10 minutes out, maybe longer." "Animals?" "Dogs. Rescue transfer. We can hear them." The trailer shifted with a deep metallic groan. Cole looked past the guardrail. The rear corner hung partly over the slope, supported by a bent steel post and what remained of the snowbank beneath it. "That rail gives," he said. "The whole back end goes down." The deputy looked at Cole's truck, then at the heavy winch assembly mounted to its front bumper. "You know how to anchor it?" Cole was already moving. He backed the pickup into position, set the brake, and ran the winch cable through a recovery block attached to the trailer's frame. He worked without unnecessary words, checking the pull angle twice before tightening the line. Years ago, men had watched his hands while he studied wires and pressure plates. Tonight, dogs whimpered behind thin metal, and the responsibility felt disturbingly familiar. The cable went taut. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the trailer settled against the line and stopped sliding. The driver was trapped only by a twisted seat belt. Cole and the deputy freed him through the passenger side opening and wrapped him in a thermal blanket. His forehead was bruised, but he remained alert enough to insist that the manifest was in the cab. 12, he said, teeth chattering. 12 dogs, mixed intake. Helena to Billings. The rescue crew arrived in 2 trucks, carrying portable lights, blankets, and transport crates. Under the direction of the county animal control officer, they began removing the dogs one at a time through the trailer's upper access door. Cole stayed near the winch, watching the cable and listening to the strain in the frame. A black Labrador came out first, trembling but able to stand. Then a brindled Mastiff mix, 2 hounds, a cattle dog with one pale eye, a shepherd mix that tried to climb inside the coat of the woman carrying it. Each animal was checked against the paper manifest. 11? 12? The animal control officer raised her voice. "That's all of them." The crew began moving the transport crates toward the warming truck. Cole did not move. Something had changed inside the overturned trailer. At first he thought it was settling metal, the faint scrape of one damaged panel against another. Then it came again. Scratch. A pause. Scratch. Not near the cages they had emptied. Farther back. Cole turned his head and listened until the noise of the wind seemed to pull away from him. Scratch. Weak. Deliberate. He crossed to the trailer and placed one gloved hand against its exposed underside. "There's another one." The animal control officer looked down at the manifest. "We counted 12. "There's another one." She climbed up beside him and listened. For several seconds, there was nothing. Then a dull tap sounded behind the rear interior wall. The driver, still seated inside the patrol car, stared through the open door with a look Cole recognized instantly. Not confusion. Fear. Cole walked toward him. "What's behind the rear partition?" The man shook his head too quickly. "Equipment storage." "Is it accessible from the main compartment?" "I don't know. I just drive." Cole studied him for a moment, but the trailer groaned again, and interrogation became a luxury. The deputy gave permission to open the panel once the animal control officer confirmed an undocumented compartment would constitute an immediate welfare concern. Cole returned to his truck for a pry bar and compact cutting tool. Inside the overturned trailer, the air smelled of wet fur, cold steel, and frightened breath. Portable work lights threw crooked shadows over empty cages. The rear wall looked ordinary until Cole knelt close enough to see fresh screws along one edge and a seam hidden beneath rubber trim. Someone had built a second space behind it. He forced the pry bar into the seam. The panel resisted. From behind it came one more scrape, so faint it was almost an apology. Cole changed his angle and pulled. Metal shrieked. 2 screws tore free. A narrow gap opened, releasing air far colder than the main compartment. He widened the opening and aimed his flashlight inside. 2 amber eyes stared back. The German shepherd lay curled inside a compartment barely large enough for her body. Her saddle was black across the back and shoulders, but the fur beneath it carried a muted gold darkened by moisture and grime. Ice clung to the ends of her coat. One ear stood upright. The tip of the other folded slightly inward, giving her exhausted face an asymmetry that made her seem less like a trained animal than an old promise someone had tried to hide. Her belly was swollen with pregnancy. She was not alone. A small dented metal box sat behind her hind legs. The dog had twisted her body around it, shielding it from the broken wall with the same posture a mother might have used to cover a puppy. Cole lowered the flashlight. "Easy," he said. The word disappeared into the compartment. The shepherd did not growl. That concerned him more than aggression would have. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes alert, only because some deeper instinct refused to let them close. Cole removed his glove and extended the back of his hand into the gap. She watched it for a long time. Then her nose moved once, barely. The trailer shifted beneath him. Outside, someone shouted that the guardrail was bending. Cole looked toward the compartment opening, then back at the shepherd. He could drag her out quickly and risk causing panic or injury, or he could wait for trust that might never arrive. The old part of him, the part trained to measure time and consequences, made the decision. He unzipped his work jacket and pulled it off. Cold immediately bit through the olive combat shirt beneath. He fed the jacket carefully into the compartment and draped it over the dog's shoulders, leaving her head uncovered. For the first time, the shepherd's eyes changed. Not trust? Recognition, perhaps, of warmth offered without force. Cole slid one arm beneath her chest and the other under her hips, careful of her abdomen. "I'm taking the box, too," he murmured. "Whatever it is." The dog's gaze sharpened. Cole hooked 2 fingers through the metal handle and drew the box against her body before lifting both together. She did not resist. As he backed through the torn partition, the trailer gave another violent lurch. The winch cables snapped tight with a sound like a rifle crack. Snow and loose equipment slid toward the opening. Cole lowered his center of gravity and moved. The shepherd weighed less than she should have, yet the shape of her in his arms opened a door in his memory that he had kept barred for years. Mercer had been heavier. Mercer's vest had smelled of dust and burned fabric. Cole had carried him through smoke, while Aaron shouted coordinates behind him. He remembered the dog's head resting against his forearm, the unnatural quiet after years of commands, signals, and shared work. He remembered promising uselessly that they were almost clear. The shepherd's head shifted against Cole's arm. For one terrible instant, past and present occupied the same space. Then she breathed, a warm, fragile breath against his wrist. Cole stepped out of the trailer and into the storm. The rescue crew wrapped the dog in insulated blankets and placed her on a padded stretcher. Even then, she refused to release the metal box. When an animal control worker tried to separate it from her, the shepherd hooked one foreleg over the lid and gave a low, warning sound. "Leave it with her," Cole said. No one argued. The trailer's rear axle slipped another 6 inches toward the slope just after they cleared the opening. By the time the emergency caravan reached Red Mercy, midnight had folded over the town. The veterinary clinic stood near the old grain elevator, its windows glowing softly through the snow. Cole followed the stretcher inside, though he had no official reason to remain. He realized who owned the clinic only when the interior door opened. Dr. Helen Crowe stepped into the treatment room, wearing charcoal scrub pants and a moss-green sweater beneath an ivory medical coat. Her chestnut hair, threaded heavily with silver, had been twisted into a low knot with the metal pine leaf clip Cole remembered from another lifetime. She stopped when she saw him. Helen was 57 now. Time had refined rather than softened her. Her face was narrower, her amber brown eyes more direct. Aaron's old watch remained on her left wrist. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then the shepherd made a strained sound on the stretcher, and Helen's attention moved where it belonged. What happened? Cole gave her the facts. The overturned trailer, the false wall, the missing record, the cold compartment. Helen worked as he spoke, cutting away wet fabric, checking gums, heartbeat, and abdominal movement. Her hands were calm, but her mouth tightened when she found the dog's ribs beneath the coat. Severe dehydration, she said. Underweight, late pregnancy. Will she make it? Helen placed the ultrasound probe against the dog's belly. The room filled with faint, rapid heartbeats. More than one. Helen listened, watching the screen. The puppies are alive. For now, they appear stable. Cole released a breath he had not noticed holding. Helen looked at him then. Not gratefully, not cruelly, simply without allowing him to hide. You could have answered one letter, she said. The sentence landed more heavily than accusation. Cole stared at the floor drain beneath the table. I know? No. You know how to say that now. That isn't the same thing. The shepherd stirred between them. Cole stepped closer, placing his bare hand near her head, but not touching her. Her amber eyes opened and found him. Helen followed the dog's gaze. She needs a name for the medical hold. Cole looked through the window. Beyond the glass, the storm had turned the parking lot into a blank white field. Yet the dog's eyes held their color, gold-brown, watchful, stubbornly present. Tundra? He said. Helen wrote it on the chart without comment. Only after fluids had begun and warm blankets surrounded Tundra did Helen examine the metal box. The animal control officer had approved opening it as part of the undocumented transport investigation. The latch was stiff with rust. Helen worked it loose with a small instrument. Inside lay no money, no paperwork, and no explanation. There was only a worn strip of gray blanket and an old leather K9 collar with a tarnished brass buckle. 4 letters had been stamped into the leather. Bram. Tundra lifted her head. Despite the IV line, despite exhaustion and fear, she pushed forward until her nose reached the collar. She breathed in once, then again, gathering whatever remained inside the cracked leather and old cloth. Her eyes closed. The tension left her shoulders. For the first time since Cole had found her behind the steel wall, Tundra rested without guarding the door, the box, or the world. Cole stood beside the table, soaked, cold, and unable to explain why that small act of surrender felt more important than being saved. Helen looked at the dog, then at him. Neither of them spoke. Outside, the white wind continued erasing every road through Red Mercy. Inside the clinic, one hidden life had finally stopped running. For the first 2 days, Cole found reasons to visit the clinic that would have sounded respectable if anyone had asked. The wall heater in the recovery room rattled when it cycled. The latch on the rear kennel stuck in cold weather. A delivery of dog food had been left beside the loading door, and Helen should not have lifted the bags alone. By the 3rd day, even Cole understood that the excuses had become transparent. Helen said nothing about it. She simply left an old wooden chair beside Tundra's recovery pen. The clinic resumed its ordinary winter rhythm around them. Ranch dogs arrived with split paw pads. A sheepdog came in after swallowing part of a leather glove. An elderly terrier objected so loudly to having its nails trimmed that Helen informed it, with grave professionalism, that intimidation was not an accepted form of payment. Cole sat in the recovery room repairing the heater grill while Tundra watched him. She did not approach the wire door. She did not ask to be touched. Her food disappeared only after Cole settled into the chair and became still. It was not affection, at least not yet. It was attendance. Tundra seemed to need proof that when Cole entered a room, he did not vanish the moment she looked away. Helen adjusted the fluid line and examined the dog's gums. She has gained a little weight. How little? Enough that I will permit cautious optimism. That sounds expensive. It is. Optimism is billed separately. Cole glanced toward her. Helen's expression remained perfectly serious, but one corner of her mouth had moved. It was the first almost joke they had shared in years, and neither of them trusted it enough to acknowledge. Tundra lowered her head to the blanket. The old K9 collar lay near her front paws. Helen had cleaned the cracked leather without removing its scent. The brass buckle remained tarnished, and the stamped letters, Bram, were worn deeper on one side, as if a thumb had rubbed across them many times. Whenever Helen moved the collar for an examination, Tundra tracked it with her eyes. Whenever it was returned, she rested one paw over it. Cole had seen working dogs guard equipment, handlers, and doorways. This was different. Tundra did not protect the collar as property. She held it like a fragment of certainty. A metal tray slipped from a counter in the treatment room beyond the door. The crash was brief. Tundra's reaction was not. Her body folded toward the floor before the sound had finished. She pressed her swollen belly against the blanket and turned sharply, placing her shoulders between the noise and the unborn puppies. Her breath came fast. Her ears flattened. The collar disappeared beneath her chest. Cole stopped moving. The heater grill remained balanced across his knees. Helen entered at once, but did not reach for the dog. "Tundra," she said quietly, "nothing is coming through that door." Tundra stared at the doorway anyway. Cole knew that kind of vigilance. A person could understand that a room was safe and still feel danger enter through the bones. There had been a period after his last deployment when digital clocks made his hands cold. Not alarms, not explosions, just square green numbers changing in the dark. Evelyn had noticed before he admitted it. She had replaced the bedside clock with one that had hands. Cole had never thanked her. He lowered the grill to the floor and sat sideways in the chair, reducing the width of his body. He did not call Tundra's name. He simply rested his right hand on his thigh, palm open. The faded trident tattoo showed where his sleeve had ridden up. Tundra's eyes moved from the doorway to his wrist. Her breathing slowed by degrees. Helen watched the change, but did not mistake it for a cure. Trauma is not a command she can obey. "I know. You used to say that as if knowing were the same as helping." Cole kept his gaze on Tundra. Sometimes knowing stops a person from making it worse. Helen's silence was neither agreement nor forgiveness, but she remained in the room. Later that afternoon, she brought in the microchip reader and a stack of printed forms. The reader chirped when she passed it over Tundra's shoulder. "One chip," Helen said. 3 registrations. Cole leaned against the counter. The earliest record identified Tundra as an unaltered female German Shepherd owned by a working dog contractor outside Great Falls. 9 months later, the chip had been transferred to a private canine placement company. 6 months after that, it appeared under a temporary rescue organization that had dissolved within weeks. The final record listed no owner at all, only a transfer code. Helen tapped the page. "The trailer that crashed belongs to Bitterroot Animal Transit. They are legitimate. Their permits are current, and every dog on the manifest came from licensed shelters." Except her. Except her. The undocumented compartment had been added recently. Its insulation was crude, but the hardware was new. Someone had arranged for Tundra to travel without appearing on the official count. Helen followed the transfer code through a regional contractor named North Range Logistics. North Range had handled animal transport for several organizations, including one whose name appeared repeatedly in the older records, Northern Valor K9 Placement. Cole read the description beneath the name: retirement placement and transitional care for former working dogs. Address? A business office in Bozeman. Their actual holding site is listed as Blackglass Quarry. Cole looked up. The name belonged to an abandoned gravel operation north of Red Mercy, beyond a county road that had stopped receiving regular winter maintenance years ago. Helen folded her arms. You know it. I repaired a loader there once, before Northern Valor leased it. What kind of place is it? Warehouses, maintenance sheds, old aggregate tunnels. Enough land that no neighbor would hear much over the wind. Tundra raised her head when Cole said the name. Blackglass. It might have been the change in his voice. It might have been nothing. But her paw tightened over Bram's collar. Helen noticed. Neither of them commented. The following morning brought clear weather for the first time since the crash. Sunlight poured over Red Mercy, turning the snowbanks blue in their own shadows. Tundra's vital signs had improved enough for Helen to permit a short change of environment, provided the dog did not walk farther than necessary. Cole brought his pickup to the clinic's side entrance. He had spread blankets across the rear bench and installed a temporary barrier so Tundra could not move into the front. Helen inspected the arrangement twice, then added another blanket, because, in her words, military engineering had never shown sufficient respect for drafts. Tundra hesitated at the open door. Cole stood several feet away, while Helen guided her up the low ramp. The dog moved carefully, protecting her abdomen, then circled once before settling against the passenger side window. The collar remained beneath her paw. Helen climbed into the rear seat beside her. Cole drove. At first they stayed within town. Tundra watched gas stations, snowplows, and people carrying groceries along the bright sidewalks. Her ears moved constantly, but her body remained loose. Cole turned west toward the river. No reaction. He turned south past the old sawmill. Tundra lay down. Then, while looping back toward the clinic, he crossed the intersection leading to County Road 9, the road north. Tundra stood so quickly that Helen caught the support harness to steady her. The dog pressed her nose against the window. A low sound formed in her throat. Not fear, not excitement. Something closer to recognition strained through distance. Cole slowed the truck. Helen looked at him through the mirror. Do not turn this into a test. I'm not. You are already calculating. She's telling us something. She is responding to something. Those are not always the same. Cole held the truck at the intersection while snow dust moved across the road like pale smoke. Then he turned north. Tundra did not pace. She remained fixed on the windshield, her ears forward and her body trembling with contained urgency. Every few miles, Cole gave her the choice by slowing near another turn. She ignored all of them. When the weathered sign for Blackglass Quarry appeared beyond a row of frozen cottonwoods, Tundra gave one strained whine and pushed against the barrier. Helen placed a steady hand against her shoulder. That is enough. Stop before the private boundary. Cole pulled onto a plowed turnout used by utility crews. County maps identified the land beside the road as public right-of-way. The quarry entrance stood several hundred yards ahead, marked by a chain-link gate and a clean white sign bearing the Northern Valor logo. A shield, a dog's head, 3 stars. The sort of emblem designed to look trustworthy from a distance. Tundra could not safely make the entire walk. Cole carried her partway in a support sling while Helen monitored her breathing. Near the gate, the dog insisted on standing. The snow there had been packed hard by truck tires. Beyond the fence, dark fabric had been stretched between metal posts to block the interior from view. The buildings behind it showed only in fragments: corrugated roofs, a water tower, and the corner of a heated storage structure. No dogs were visible. Tundra approached the gate slowly. Cole did not guide her. She found the narrow gap beneath the lowest section of tarp and lowered herself to the snow. Then she pushed Bram's collar forward between her paws until the brass buckle touched the fence. Her nose pressed against the cold wire. For several seconds, nothing happened. Helen stood beside Cole, one hand already reaching for her phone. Then, from deep within the quarry, came a single bark. It was rough and low, the voice of an old dog whose chest no longer carried sound easily. Tundra's entire body changed. Her ears lifted, her eyes widened. A trembling breath passed through her, but she did not bark back. She placed her muzzle against the fence. The distant dog barked again. Closer this time, or perhaps merely louder. A vehicle engine started somewhere behind the buildings. Helen took out her phone and photographed the gate, the sign, and the location marker. She called the county sheriff first, then the state animal health office. Her report was factual. An undocumented pregnant dog linked by transfer records to Northern Valor, behavioral recognition of the site, and audible evidence of animals housed beyond the visible licensed area. The deputy on duty agreed to document the complaint. The state office promised to review the licensing records and schedule an inspection. "Schedule?" Helen repeated. "How soon?" The answer did not satisfy her. Cole heard it in the way she ended the call. 14 business days, she said. He looked toward the tarp. The engine behind it idled for a minute, then stopped. "They can move every dog in one night," Cole said. "I am aware." Helen called again, this time requesting an emergency welfare review. Without visible injury, an active threat, or direct evidence of unlawful confinement, the request could not yet be elevated. Cole examined the fence line, the cameras mounted near the gate, and the narrow road disappearing along the property. "We could learn more from the ridge," he said. "From public land?" "Part of it." "And the rest?" Cole did not answer. Helen stepped between him and the gate. "No." "I haven't done anything?" "You have the face you used to wear before doing something you had already decided was necessary. That face kept people alive. That face also convinced you that nobody else deserved a vote." The old dog barked once more behind the tarp. Tundra rose despite Helen's hand on the harness. Cole's voice hardened. "If we wait 2 weeks, there may be nothing here to inspect. And if you trespass, any attorney with a pulse will challenge what you find. We are not discussing a parking violation. No, we are discussing living animals, which is exactly why anger cannot be allowed to ruin the only case we have." Cole turned toward her. "You think this is anger? I think you have spent years turning fear into procedure, and now you are trying to turn guilt into a mission." The words struck with greater accuracy than volume. Tundra moved between them, not protectively. She simply stood in the narrow space, breathing hard, Bram's collar hanging from her mouth. Cole looked down at her. Helen's voice softened, though the firmness remained. "I want them out too, but I will not help you create a heroic failure." Cole stared through the fence for a long moment. Then he stepped back. "We document everything available from public ground," he said. "Records, vehicle movement, licenses, ownership, nothing inside the fence." Helen nodded once. "That is a beginning. It may not be enough. Then we find more people who know what happened here." They returned to the truck before Tundra became overtired. The dog looked back at the quarry until the road curved and the gate disappeared. That evening, Helen placed her in the recovery room with fresh water, medication, and a warmed blanket. Cole repaired the kennel latch he had already repaired the day before, filing the metal edge until there was no practical reason to continue. Neither he nor Helen mentioned their argument. At 10, Cole put on his coat. Tundra rose. He paused at the door. "You need rest?" he told her. The dog watched him without blinking. Cole looked toward Helen's office. Light still showed beneath the door. He considered leaving before she emerged, then removed his coat and returned to the wooden chair. Tundra lay down again. Much later, after the clinic had gone quiet, Helen checked the room. Cole was asleep with his arms folded across his chest, chin lowered. Tundra was not. She lay facing the north wall, Bram's collar beneath her muzzle, eyes open in the dimness. Somewhere beyond Red Mercy, behind a fence and a clean white sign, an old dog had answered her. And Tundra was still listening. Cole began with addresses, not accusations, not theories. Addresses. At the workbench inside his garage, he spread printed contracts across the scarred wood between socket wrenches, electrical testers, and a disassembled snowblower carburetor. The old military supply building had no proper office, so he used a mechanic's lamp and 3 mugs to hold the papers flat against the draft. Outside, morning sunlight flashed across the snowfields with almost painful brightness. Inside, the garage smelled of machine oil, cold iron, and coffee that had been left too long on the burner. Cole entered each destination listed in Northern Valor's placement records into a county database. The first address belonged to a mailbox store in Helena. The second was an empty house whose tax records showed no occupant for 4 years. The third identified a farm outside Livingston. Satellite images showed an abandoned barn collapsed beneath snow, with no maintained road leading to it. By noon, he had checked 17 placements. 9 did not exist in any meaningful sense. 4 belonged to businesses unrelated to animals. 2 were private residences whose owners had never registered a dog. Only 2 appeared legitimate. Cole marked each page with a mechanical pencil, pressing hard enough to leave grooves in the paper. He did not circle the false addresses in red. Red suggested judgment. Graphite suggested work unfinished. On the radio, a local announcer described perfect skiing conditions and reminded listeners that the Winter Festival Ice Sculpture Contest had been moved to Saturday. The cheerful voice made the list of vanished dogs feel more obscene. Each contract included a name: Marlowe, Jet, Sable, Havoc, Bram. Cole had once believed records were cold things. Coordinates, inventories, casualty reports. The kind of documents men created because grief became unmanageable when written in complete sentences. Now the names changed that. He called Helen. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding distracted. Tundra is eating. I didn't ask. You were going to. Cole looked down at Bram's name. I found 9 false destinations. The movement on Helen's end stopped. Out of how many? 17. A pause followed. Not surprise. Calculation. I found something too, she said. 3 veterinary certificates attached to Northern Valor transfers. The signatures belong to Marjorie Vale. You know her? Everyone in veterinary medicine across 3 Montana counties knows Marjorie. She has been practicing longer than some of our barns have been standing. Can she confirm the dogs? She can confirm whether she signed the forms. When? I called her 20 minutes ago. She said she would come this afternoon. Cole gathered the papers. Helen heard the movement. You do not need to bring the entire garage. I'm bringing the records. And coffee that has not been punished for several hours, preferably. He disconnected before she could interpret his silence as agreement. He brought fresh coffee anyway. Dr. Marjorie Vale arrived at the clinic driving an aging burgundy station wagon with a cracked rear bumper and chains on all 4 tires. She stepped out wearing a dark green wool coat over practical black trousers, her silver hair cut short around a narrow face that seemed designed for skepticism. At 62, Marjorie moved carefully, but not slowly. She carried a leather document case in one hand and a folded cane in the other, though she used neither until the clinic steps. Helen met her at the door. Marjorie accepted one brief embrace, then looked past her at Cole. You are the mechanic. Sometimes. The veteran. Former? The man who found the pregnant shepherd. Cole nodded. Marjorie studied him over thin rectangular glasses. Helen said you were difficult. Helen took the document case from her. I said thorough. You have learned diplomacy in your old age. I am younger than you? Only chronologically. They entered the consultation room, where Cole had arranged copies of the certificates beside the transfer contracts. Tundra rested in the recovery area beyond the half-open door. She watched Marjorie with suspicion, but did not rise. One paw remained draped across Bram's collar. Marjorie sat and examined the first certificate. She did not need long. That is not my signature. Helen leaned closer. Certain? My hand has arthritis. The final stroke on the V has curved left for 6 years. Marjorie tapped the copied name. This one curves right. Whoever copied it used an older document. She checked the second and third certificates. All false. Cole slid a list of identification numbers toward her. Do any of the dogs look familiar? Marjorie adjusted her glasses. 2 names meant nothing to her. The third stopped her hand. Bishop, she said. You treated him? 7 years ago. Belgian Malinois. Torn shoulder after avalanche search work near Big Sky. She sat back. He was not ready for retirement then, but he was not suitable for deployment either. He needed controlled rehabilitation and a quiet handler. The record says he was transferred to a family in Wyoming. Was he? The address is a storage facility. Marjorie removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. For a moment, professional certainty gave way to something older and more weary. This is not a single bad facility, she said. It is a system designed around endings nobody wants to pay for. Cole remained standing. Explain. Marjorie looked toward Tundra before answering. Working dogs are expensive when they are useful. Training, equipment, specialized food, veterinary care. People call them partners, assets, heroes. Her mouth tightened. Then age arrives. Arthritis, hearing loss, anxiety around crowded homes. Some cannot live with cats. Some do not tolerate strangers leaning over them. Some wake at every sound because they spent 8 years being rewarded for vigilance. Helen folded her hands on the table. Marjorie continued. The organization that used them pays a contractor to place them. The contractor pays another group to take difficult cases. Somewhere along that chain, responsibility becomes a receipt. And Northern Valor collects the receipt, Cole said. Perhaps. But do not make the mistake of thinking every person who handed over a dog intended cruelty. Most probably believed the story they were given. Cole looked at the list again. Belief is convenient when no one checks. Marjorie met his eyes. Yes, it is. The sentence settled between them with no need for elaboration. Tundra shifted in the recovery room. Helen rose to check her, but the shepherd remained calm. She had begun allowing Helen to sit inside the pen during examinations, provided the movements were announced beforehand. The change was small enough that another person might not have recognized it. Cole did. Helen picked up a medical chart and began reading the feeding amounts aloud. Marjorie watched from the doorway. You still do that? Helen did not turn. Do what? Read to the patient as though the numbers are literature. It gives them warning before I touch them. That is not why you started. Helen's hand paused against Tundra's blanket. Cole knew he should look away. He did not. Aaron hated silence in hospitals, Marjorie said gently. Helen resumed reading. Aaron hated silence everywhere. Tundra lifted her head at the change in Helen's voice. Helen crouched beside her. He used to make me read maintenance manuals when there was nothing else. Was that before or after he claimed they had narrative tension? Marjorie asked. A quiet laugh escaped Helen before she could stop it. Tundra's ears rose. The sound altered the room more than any confession might have. Cole had forgotten Helen's laugh. Not its tone exactly, but the way it began reluctantly, as though amusement had surprised her into honesty. The moment passed. Helen closed the chart and stood. "We still need to understand who runs Northern Valor," she said. Cole already had the answer. Gideon Rusk had served 14 years in military logistics before moving into private contracting. He was 49, licensed under 3 corporate entities, and listed as Director of Northern Valor K9 Placement for the past 6 years. 2 days later, Cole drove to Black Glass Quarry alone. He did not tell Gideon he had found false addresses. He called first and said he was considering adopting a retired working dog. Gideon had invited him to tour the public section of the facility with surprising ease. The front gate opened electronically. Inside, the road had been plowed. Clean signs directed visitors toward administration, intake, and exercise yards. The first kennel building looked modest but functional, with heated floors and stainless steel water bowls. Gideon Rusk met Cole outside the office. He was shorter than Cole expected, broad through the middle, dressed in a steel-gray technical jacket over a pale blue shirt. His ash-blonde hair was cut neatly, and his boots were clean despite the slush around the buildings. He held a waterproof clipboard. No dog hair clung to his clothing. "Mr. Maddox," Gideon said, offering a gloved hand. "I appreciate anyone willing to consider a senior placement." His voice was smooth without being charming, efficient, the tone of a man accustomed to turning complicated things into manageable categories. Cole shook his hand. "I was told you handle former K9s." "When possible." Gideon led him through the front kennel wing. 6 dogs occupied separate runs. Their bedding was dry. The room smelled of disinfectant but not neglect. One aging Labrador slept beneath a heat lamp. A shepherd with a gray muzzle watched Cole without rising. "You have empty spaces," Cole said. "We maintain capacity for emergency intake." "How many dogs are currently housed here?" 23. The number came too quickly. Cole glanced toward the exterior wall. From somewhere beyond it came a faint vibration, metal rattling, followed by the muffled burst of several dogs barking at once. Gideon did not react. Cole did. "What is behind that building?" "Storage and quarantine." "Can I see it?" "Not during public tours." "Why?" "Biosecurity. Some animals arrive with incomplete vaccination records." The explanation was reasonable. That was what made it dangerous. Gideon showed him a food room with labeled bins and a clipboard log filled out in disciplined handwriting. Medication was stored in locked cabinets. The exercise yard had clean snow and solid fencing. Cole saw no obvious cruelty. He also saw no dogs matching the larger transfer lists. In the office, framed photographs showed Gideon shaking hands with airport supervisors, county officials, and veterans groups. One picture featured him kneeling beside a retired shepherd beneath a banner that read, "Service deserves sanctuary." Gideon followed Cole's gaze. "I started this place because nobody else wanted the difficult dogs," he said. "Difficult how?" "Old, reactive, expensive, impossible to place through normal shelters." He removed one glove and adjusted the cuff of his sleeve. "Everyone celebrates a working dog on deployment. Few people volunteer when that same dog needs heart medication and cannot tolerate visitors." "You sound angry at the people who surrender them." "I am practical about them." "There's a difference?" "There has to be." Gideon's expression remained controlled. Compassion without funding is a speech. Compassion without capacity becomes hoarding. Cole looked through the office window toward the warehouses deeper in the quarry. Another bark echoed faintly through the wall. Old, hoarse. Then several more answered. Gideon closed the office door. "Some dogs cannot be shown to prospective adopters," he said. "It agitates them." Cole turned back to him. "Do you ever reject a transfer?" Gideon's silence lasted half a second too long. "We try not to abandon dogs other organizations have already abandoned." It was a powerful answer, almost noble. Cole left without challenging it. The visit gave him no evidence he could use, only the strong impression of a clean room built in front of a locked one. That evening he returned to Helen's clinic. She was sitting on the floor beside Tundra, reading from a folded page. Not medical notes this time. Cole recognized Erin's handwriting before he saw the old field notebook resting open on her knee. Helen looked up. "I found it in the storage box from the house." Cole stayed near the doorway. He had not seen the notebook since Erin carried it in a chest pocket overseas. The cover was dark canvas, worn pale along the edges. "What is in it?" Cole asked. "Not what I expected." Erin had not been investigating Northern Valor. The dates were too old, and most of the organization did not yet exist. Instead, he had collected notes about retired working dogs transferred into private care. Who retains legal ownership after retirement? Who verifies the final placement? What happens when the handler cannot adopt? Who pays after the contract ends? Several pages contained rough plans for a small rehabilitation property where aging K9s could live alongside veterans who struggled with isolation. Not therapy assignments, not automatic pairings, shared structure. Work without deployment. Responsibility without command. Near the back, Erin had drawn a crude floor plan of a converted maintenance garage. Cole read the measurements twice. They were close to the dimensions of the abandoned supply garage beside his house. "He never showed me this," Helen said. "He never showed me either." A faded photograph slipped from between the pages. Erin stood in a training yard, younger and thinner, one arm resting across the shoulders of a large German shepherd. The dog's coat was dark, its ears alert, its eyes fixed on something beyond the camera. On the back, Erin had written one word: Bram. Tundra lifted her head. Helen placed the photograph beside the collar. The shepherd sniffed it carefully, then looked toward the clinic door as though expecting the dog in the image to enter. "We cannot know what he was to her," Helen said. "Not from this." "Could they be related?" "Possible. There is no evidence." She touched the edge of the photograph. "He may simply have been the dog that stood beside her when no one else did." Cole looked at Erin's unfinished plans. For years he had imagined the dead as guardians of completed truths. Men who left behind final words, clean intentions and answers the living had failed to understand. But Erin had left questions, half-measured rooms, unresolved costs, a future written in pencil. Cole closed the notebook carefully. Erin hadn't hidden a secret for him to uncover. He had recognized a failure before it had acquired a name. And somewhere between the false addresses, the clean kennels, and the unseen dogs behind Black Glass Quarry, that failure had continued growing because too many people had mistaken transfer for responsibility. Tundra lowered her muzzle onto Bram's photograph. Helen remained beside her. Cole stood in the doorway, no longer certain whether he had come to investigate the past or ask it what the living were supposed to do next. The evidence did not arrive as a revelation. It accumulated like snow against a closed door. One invoice showed twice the amount of food Northern Valor could reasonably have used for the number of dogs listed on its license. Another showed too little. Medication orders contained identification numbers belonging to animals supposedly placed months earlier. Transport records ended at county lines and resumed under different company names. Cole, Helen, and Marjorie worked from 3 separate tables inside the clinic's unused conference room. Cole mapped vehicle routes and property records. Helen compared microchips with medical histories. Marjorie reviewed prescriptions, dosage changes, and veterinary certificates with the unforgiving patience of someone who had spent a lifetime catching mistakes that could not be apologized away. They did not call it an investigation. None of them had the authority. They called it a chronology. "People lie in stories," Marjorie said, drawing a line through a forged medication order. "Dates are less imaginative." Helen held up a food invoice. "Unless the dates are also lying." "Then we ask the quantities." Cole said nothing. He was looking at a parcel map of Black Glass Quarry. The land belonged to Dale Mercer. The surname stopped him for half a second, not because Dale had any connection to Cole's former K9. Mercer had been named long before Cole met him, after a river town in Pennsylvania. Still, the coincidence sat uneasily in his chest. Helen noticed his expression. "Do you know him?" "Only the name." Dale Mercer lived 12 miles east of Red Mercy on a small property bordered by cottonwoods and rusting agricultural equipment. Public records showed that he had owned Black Glass Quarry for 31 years and leased the central buildings to Northern Valor 6 years earlier. Cole called him from the clinic. Dale answered on the 9th ring. His voice was rough and suspicious. When Cole mentioned Black Glass, the line went quiet. "You law enforcement?" Dale asked. "No." "Reporter?" "No." "Then why are you asking?" "Because there are dogs behind that fence that do not appear on the records." A long breath moved through the receiver. Then Dale gave him directions. They found him the next morning inside a machine shed warmed by an old barrel stove. Dale was 64, thick through the chest and hands, with a short square beard gone almost entirely white. His left little finger remained bent at the middle joint, and an old mining company cap sat low over thinning silver hair. He did not offer coffee. He did not ask them to sit. His gaze moved from Cole to Helen, then to Marjorie's document case. "You brought a committee." "We brought questions," Helen said. Dale gave a humorless grunt. "Committees bring those too." The shed walls were lined with equipment manuals, worn shovels, and framed photographs of Black Glass Quarry in its working years. In one, rescue teams trained dogs among gravel slopes and concrete tunnels. Helen stepped closer to the picture. "This was a canine facility?" "Part-time," Dale said. "Search and rescue groups leased it in winter, avalanche dogs, cadaver teams. The tunnels held temperature. Warehouses had floor drains. We installed a water cistern and backup generator." "That is why Gideon wanted it," Cole said. Dale stared at the barrel stove. "He said he needed a transition site. Dogs coming out of service, quiet land, heated buildings, room to exercise them away from crowds." His jaw tightened. It sounded useful. "What changed?" Marjorie asked. "The numbers." At first, Dale saw 6 or 8 dogs when he visited, then 15, then trucks arriving after midnight. Northern Valor's license permitted 23 animals, but Dale counted more than 40 during one delivery. He confronted Gideon and received spreadsheets, transfer schedules, and assurances that the excess dogs would be gone within days. They were not. Dale attempted to terminate the lease. Gideon's attorney responded with a threat of litigation for breach of contract and loss of business. The quarry was Dale's largest remaining asset. He had medical debt from his wife's final years and a loan secured against the property. "So you stayed quiet," Cole said. Dale looked at him directly. "Yes." There was no defense in the answer, only wait. "I told myself I needed proof. Then I told myself the dogs were still being fed. Then I told myself losing the quarry would not help them." Dale reached toward the stove but did not touch it. "A man can build a whole house out of reasons if he never checks whether the roof keeps out rain." Helen's voice remained controlled. "Did you report any of it?" "No." "Did you enter the facility?" "I still own the ground. Gideon controls the leased buildings." Dale looked toward the back of the shed. Sometimes the side gate did not latch. He had entered at night several times with bags of food and old horse blankets. He had not photographed conditions or copied records. He had only tried to make individual nights less cold. Marjorie's expression hardened. "You relieved your conscience without changing the danger." "I know." The words came quickly this time. Dale walked to a locked metal cabinet and removed a folded map. The quarry buildings had been marked in pencil. Front kennels, office, food storage, generator room. Behind them, separated by a service lane, were two long buildings labeled QA and QB. "Quarantine?" Cole asked. "That is what the plans say." "And what are they?" "The place he keeps the dogs nobody is supposed to count." Dale pointed to the farthest section. "One old shepherd stays there. Bram." Helen's attention sharpened. "You are certain of the name?" "Leather collar, brass plate, big dog once. Still carries himself that way when the joints let him." Dale had seen Bram lying in the run beside Tundra's enclosure. The old dog rarely barked, but he placed himself between Tundra and workers whenever doors opened. "When they loaded her onto the trailer," Dale said, "Bram hit the gate hard enough to bend the latch. 2 men had to move him to the back isolation run." Cole thought of the bark behind the tarp. Why was Tundra being moved? Pregnant dogs were not supposed to be there. Gideon said she had a private placement. "Did you believe him?" Helen asked. Dale looked down. "No." The answer altered the room. Until then, his silence might have been interpreted as fear, uncertainty, or weakness. This was different. He had known enough. Cole folded the map. How did Northern Valor become this? Dale sat on an overturned bucket, suddenly looking older than he had minutes before. It did not happen in one decision. In the beginning, Gideon had accepted dogs other organizations would not take. Some were rehabilitated. A few returned to former handlers. Dale had seen photographs and adoption letters that appeared genuine. Then a major donor withdrew. Heating costs rose. Veterinary bills came due. Gideon accepted more contracts because each transfer arrived with a placement fee. The money from new dogs paid for the old ones. For a while. Then it paid the staff. Then the fuel. Then the debt. After that, Dale said, the dogs were not living creatures in his books. They were delayed expenses. Northern Valor began listing false placements to close files while keeping animals on site. Medication was rationed. Staff hours were cut. Gideon signed an agreement with North Range Logistics, which claimed it could move younger, capable dogs into overseas private security work. Did he know where they were going? Cole asked. He knew there were no inspection reports. He knew the contracts used holding companies. He stopped asking because the checks cleared. Marjorie closed her document case. That is not ignorance. No, Dale said. It is practiced blindness. The phrase stayed with Cole on the drive back. Practiced blindness, not one grand act of cruelty. 1,000 small permissions. At the clinic, they found Tundra restless. She had refused breakfast and torn half the bedding into a rough nest. Her breathing remained steady, but she paced whenever Helen left the room. Helen checked her abdomen, then looked at the clock. She is beginning labor. Cole's mind moved toward practical tasks: towels, heat, instruments, emergency transport. Helen caught the change in his posture. Do not turn the room into an operating station. She may need calm. The recovery space was cleared of unnecessary equipment. Helen dimmed the overhead lights and laid thick blankets across the warmed floor. No metal crate was brought in. Marjorie prepared supplies in the adjoining room, close enough to assist, but out of Tundra's sight. Cole waited near the door. Tundra circled the blankets twice. Then she crossed the room and lowered herself beside his boots. Helen glanced at him. Sit! Cole sank to the floor with his back against the wall. He did not touch Tundra. He placed his right hand near her head, palm down, close enough for her to choose the distance. The hours that followed had none of the clean rhythm Cole preferred. There was waiting, movement, another long interval of waiting. Helen spoke softly, not offering false reassurance. She monitored Tundra's breathing and the puppy's progress, stepping in only when needed. The first puppy arrived shortly after midnight, a dark male with a broad mask and an indignant voice far larger than his body. The second was a lighter female who made almost no sound until Tundra began cleaning her. The third came after a longer pause that tightened the room. Cole watched Helen's face rather than the clock. When the final puppy began breathing strongly, Marjorie released a breath from the doorway. 3, all alive. Tundra gathered them against her abdomen. Her head remained low from exhaustion, but she did not hide the puppies beneath her body when Helen checked them. More strikingly, she did not move away when Cole shifted closer. One of the pups crawled blindly across the blanket and pressed against the leather toe of his boot. Cole looked down at it. "I suppose that one has poor judgment," he said. Helen wiped her hands on a towel. "It may run in the family." Cole looked at her. The faint warmth in her expression disappeared before either of them had to decide what it meant. Tundra slept. For the first time, she slept while 2 people remained near her children. 10 days later, the puppies had gained weight, and Tundra could cross the room without trembling. Helen allowed only limited visitors, controlled handling, and no unnecessary noise. The investigation had slowed. Dale's information strengthened the chronology, but much of it still depended on testimony. The state inspection remained scheduled, not urgent. Then Helen received an email from an address made of random numbers. The message contained no greeting, only a photograph. It showed a row of kennels inside a dim building. Several German shepherds lay on thin mats. On the wall behind them, a dry erase board listed identification codes absent from Northern Valor's licensed count. A second image showed a transport schedule. The date was 3 nights away. Helen called the number included at the bottom. A woman answered in a whisper. "My name is Renee Calder," she said. "I put Bram's collar in the trailer." Helen activated the speaker and motioned Cole closer. Renee spoke in fragments at first, pausing whenever footsteps passed near her location. She had worked at Black Glass Quarry for almost 2 years. She had believed Northern Valor rescued difficult K9s. By the time she understood, the records were false, leaving no longer felt simple. Gideon controlled staff housing for some employees and threatened legal action against anyone who removed company material. Renee had begun copying schedules and photographing the isolation runs. She had hidden Bram's collar and a piece of his bedding with Tundra because she feared the dog would be transferred under a new identity. "Why Tundra?" Cole asked. "Because Bram would not leave her," Renee replied, "and because she was going somewhere no one would be allowed to trace." Her voice broke, but she continued. Gideon had learned the state was reviewing Northern Valor's license. He planned to move every undocumented dog before the inspection. North Range trucks would arrive during the next winter storm, when road traffic and public visibility were lowest. "How many?" Helen asked. 21 not on the license. Maybe more." "Where are they being taken?" "I do not know. The route sheet only says South Transfer Point." Cole looked through the recovery room window. Tundra lay with 3 puppies pressed against her belly. Bram's collar rested beside her front paw. Helen asked Renee to send every file she could access without placing herself in immediate danger. She also instructed her not to confront Gideon or attempt to remove any dog alone. Renee agreed. Before ending the call, she said one more thing. "The older dogs will not all survive a long transport in that weather." The line went silent. Outside, the afternoon sky above Red Mercy remained bright and clear. The storm had not yet arrived. People moved along Main Street carrying groceries and winter festival decorations. Snow glittered peacefully on rooftops. Inside the clinic, Cole studied the transfer schedule. For days, the danger had been a place, a fence, a delayed inspection. Now it had become a deadline. Northern Valor did not need to hide the missing dogs forever. It only needed to move them beyond Montana before anyone with authority arrived to count them. By noon, the old military supply garage no longer belonged to Cole's silence. Its wide steel doors stood open beneath a clear winter sky, and sunlight spilled across the concrete floor in pale rectangles. Folding chairs had been borrowed from the church basement. 2 portable heaters hummed beside the walls. Someone had brought a coffee urn large enough to supply a railroad station, though the coffee itself tasted as if it had been filtered through roofing nails. Cole had spent years using the building as storage. A broken snowblower occupied one corner. Shelves held generator parts, surplus rope, old tool cases, and boxes he had never fully unpacked after Evelyn died. Now a projector screen hung from the overhead crane, and more than 50 people sat facing it in heavy coats. Red Mercy was not a town that gathered easily around trouble. It gathered around winter festivals, funerals, school fundraisers, and machinery that refused to start. Trouble was usually discussed in pairs, behind counters, or through half-open truck windows. Today, there was nowhere for the town to look except forward. Cole stood near the projector in his olive combat shirt, camouflage sleeves pushed to his forearms. The faded trident tattoo on his right arm remained visible beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. He had considered wearing something less personal. Then he decided honesty did not require a costume. Helen stood beside a portable examination table where medical records had been arranged in labeled folders. Her moss-green sweater showed beneath an ivory coat, and Aaron's old watch caught the light whenever she turned a page. Marjorie sat at a workbench with her document case open. Dale stood near the wall, one hand gripping the brim of his old mining cap. He had volunteered to speak, then spent 20 minutes appearing to regret it. June Hollowell occupied a chair in the back row. Cole had known June by reputation long before meeting her. At 55, she was small and quick-moving, with a sharp, heart-shaped face, a silver blonde bob, and dark red glasses that made every raised eyebrow look like punctuation. A weathered camera bag rested against her boots. She held no camera now, only a notebook and a blue ink pen. She had received Renee's photographs the previous evening. She had also agreed not to publish before law enforcement acted. Cole did not know whether that restraint made him trust her. He knew it made him take her seriously. Helen began. She did not use dramatic language. She described Tundra's dehydration, poor body condition, late pregnancy, repeated microchip transfers, and undocumented transport. She explained how Northern Valor's medical records contained false certifications and prescriptions connected to dogs no longer listed at the facility. Marjorie followed. She held up a copied health certificate bearing her forged signature. "This is not an error," she said. "It is an instrument. A forged veterinary record allows an animal to move through a system while appearing examined, vaccinated, and properly placed." Her voice was not loud, but the garage had become so still that the coffee urn clicking off sounded intrusive. Dale came next. He placed the quarry map on an easel and identified the public kennels, the rear isolation buildings, the service roads, and the loading area concealed from the county road. He did not tell the town he had been deceived. He told them he had chosen not to report what he saw. "I thought I needed more proof," he said. "Then I thought someone else would notice. After that, I thought losing my property would make matters worse." He removed his cap. "What I meant was that doing the right thing might cost me something." No one interrupted. Dale looked down at the map. "So I did smaller things, brought food, left blankets, things that helped me sleep and did not help enough. Cole watched several faces in the audience lower. Dale's confession had changed the room more than the documents. Paper could be blamed on corporations, contractors, and invisible systems. Silence belonged to ordinary people. Cole turned on the projector. A list of names appeared on the screen. 48 K9s transferred through Northern Valor over 3 years. Beside each name was the official outcome: adopted, private placement, sanctuary transfer, or handler reunion. The next column showed what Cole and Helen had verified: invalid address, closed business, unoccupied property, no registration. Unknown. He read the names without commentary: Marlowe, Jet, Sable, Havoc, Bram. A chair scraped near the third row. A man had risen halfway, one hand braced against the seat in front of him. He was shorter than Cole, broad through the waist and shoulders, with a heavy white mustache and a Navy patrol coat that looked older than some of the people present. A brass whistle hung from a leather cord at his chest. His left shoulder sat slightly lower than the right. "Havoc?" he asked. Cole looked at the screen. German Shepherd, male, former search and rescue K9. The man remained standing. "My name is Warren Pike." His voice carried the roughness of someone unused to public speaking. "Havoc worked avalanche recovery with me for 7 years. When my shoulder failed, the county contractor said he had been placed with a family in Idaho. A farm, retired couple, no other dogs." Cole changed the slide. Havoc's listed destination appeared. The property belonged to a commercial storage company outside Pocatello. Warren stared at it. For several seconds, he seemed not to understand the arrangement of words. Then he sat down. No one offered him comfort. Not because the town lacked kindness, but because grief sometimes demanded the dignity of space. Warren reached for the whistle at his chest. "I wrote every Christmas," he said. June's pen stopped. Warren gave a short, embarrassed laugh with no amusement in it. "Fool thing to do. The contractors said the family preferred privacy, so I sent letters through their office. Updates, weather, told him when the snow came." Helen moved toward him, but Warren raised one hand. "I do not need anyone to tell me. I could not have known." His eyes remained on the projected address. "I need someone to tell me whether he is alive." Cole answered carefully. "We do not know yet." Warren nodded once. It was not relief, but it was something solid enough to stand on. The meeting changed after that. People stopped asking whether Northern Valor's records were suspicious and began asking what could be done legally before the scheduled transfer. Sheriff Ada Kincaid stood near the garage door in a brown uniform jacket, listening without interrupting. She had already received Renee's statement through a secure interview that morning. An assistant county attorney had reviewed the forged records. The State Animal Health Office had been sent the transport schedule and images of undocumented kennels. The public meeting did not create the evidence. It made delay harder to defend. Sheriff Kincaid stepped forward. "We are submitting an emergency application for a search warrant and temporary animal seizure authority," she said. "The application is based on falsified veterinary documentation, unlicensed animal capacity, credible internal testimony, and a scheduled transport during an active winter road advisory." Murmurs moved through the chairs. She raised a hand. "This is not permission for anyone here to go to the quarry." The room quieted. "No private vehicles, no citizen patrol, no social media convoy. Anyone entering that property without authorization risks the safety of the dogs, the staff, and the case." Cole saw disappointment on a few faces. He also saw embarrassment. Red Mercy liked action. It respected useful hands. Being told to remain outside the fence felt too much like doing nothing. Helen stepped forward before frustration could turn romantic. "The dogs will need help after they leave the quarry," she said. That is where the town becomes useful. The garage could serve as an emergency intake site for 72 hours if the county approved temporary sanitation, heating, quarantine, and documentation protocols. The front half would become triage. The rear bay would hold transport crates. Only trained or assigned volunteers would enter animal care zones. Everyone else could donate supplies, prepare food, clear snow, or drive approved vehicles under county direction. The mood shifted, not toward heroism, toward work. June raised her hand. "Are you publishing names before the warrant is served?" Cole asked. "No." Her voice was quick and clean. "I am asking whether the temporary facility will maintain independent intake records." Helen answered. "Every animal will receive a new county case number, microchip scan, photograph, and examination sheet on arrival." "Who controls those records?" "The county veterinarian." "Who receives copies?" "The sheriff's office, state animal health division, and court." June wrote that down. Good. Cole understood then that June's role was not to applaud the rescue. It was to remember what everyone promised before the doors opened. By late afternoon, the town had divided itself into tasks. The fire department loaned portable partitions. The feed store delivered unopened bags of appropriate diets. The motel brought clean blankets that had been removed from service, but not damaged. A plumbing contractor installed a temporary wash station. People arrived with things no one had requested: dog toys, homemade quilts, a basket of knitted sweaters in sizes suitable for terriers, not retired German shepherds. Helen placed the sweaters in a separate box labeled "Well Intended." Cole almost smiled. Then Sheriff Kincaid's phone rang. She walked outside to answer it. Every conversation in the garage gradually stopped. When she returned, snow had melted across the shoulders of her jacket. "We have the warrant," she said. No one cheered. The words were too heavy for celebration. The temporary seizure order covered all undocumented dogs, medical and transfer records, digital storage, transport vehicles, and the rear isolation buildings identified by Renee. The operation would begin before the main storm reached Granite Mercy Pass. Cole looked toward the open garage doors. Beyond them, Red Mercy remained bright and deceptively peaceful. The first thin clouds had begun gathering over the western mountains. Nolan Wexler arrived an hour later in a cobalt parka, carrying 2 waterproof medical cases and a clipboard sealed inside a plastic sleeve. The county veterinarian was 51, lean, long-armed, and tired around the eyes, with black and silver hair combed carefully to one side. He looked across the crowded garage. "Which one of you designed this intake flow?" Cole pointed toward Helen. Nolan studied the taped lanes on the floor, the isolation section, and the numbered examination stations. "Annoyingly competent," he said. Helen handed him the protocol sheets. "You may praise me after you improve it." "I was not praising you." "Then you are already behind schedule." Nolan's mouth twitched. He would supervise medical triage at the quarry and control which dogs could travel together. Helen would manage intake at the garage. Marjorie would remain at the clinic with Tundra and the puppies, available for emergency consultation. Warren asked to accompany the operation. Sheriff Kincaid refused at first. Then Nolan reviewed Havoc's records and agreed Warren might be useful if the dog was found and remained responsive to an old handler's signals. Warren would travel in an official vehicle and remain outside the restricted area until called. No other former handlers had yet been confirmed. By evening, the garage was ready. Cole drove to the clinic before reporting to the staging point. Tundra lay in the recovery room with her 3 puppies gathered against her belly. They were stronger now, their movements less like blind searching and more like tiny acts of opinion. When Cole entered wearing his winter parka, Tundra lifted her head immediately. She watched him check the straps on his gloves and the radio clipped to his chest. Then she stood. Her legs trembled. She moved toward the low gate, leaving the puppies behind for the first time since their birth. Cole crouched outside the pen. "You are not coming." Tundra pressed against the gate. There was no panic in her, no frantic scratching. She simply stood with a quiet insistence that made refusal feel like betrayal. Cole removed Bram's collar from the shelf. Tundra's eyes followed it. He placed the collar on the blanket before her front paws. "I know who you are waiting for." She lowered her nose to the leather. "I will bring him back if he can be brought." The promise felt dangerous the moment it left him. Cole had learned long ago that good intentions did not alter terrain, weather, injury, or time. Tundra stepped closer. Through the bars, she touched her nose to the raised scars along his right wrist. Then her tongue passed once over the deepest line. Cole went still. It was not the same gesture Orion had offered another wounded man in another imagined life. It belonged only to Tundra, deliberate, brief, and without submission. She was not comforting him. She was accepting the promise. Cole rested 2 fingers against her cheek. "You stay with them." Tundra turned back toward the puppies. She lay down beside them and placed one paw across Bram's collar. Cole rose. At the treatment room door, Helen was waiting. "You should not promise outcomes you cannot control," she said. "I know. This time you actually do." Cole looked past her toward the darkening windows. "Yes?" Helen handed him a folded paper. It contained the intake code for Bram, already entered into the county system. Not rescued, not safe. Expected. A place had been prepared for him before anyone knew whether he would occupy it. Cole tucked the paper into the waterproof notebook inside his coat. Outside, engines started across Red Mercy. No crowd followed them. No angry citizens carried torches toward the quarry. The town remained behind, heating water, numbering kennels, clearing roads, and waiting to receive whatever the night returned. Cole climbed into the county transport truck. Through the clinic window, Tundra watched until the vehicle turned north. For the first time, she did not try to follow. She lowered her head beside her puppies and trusted the scarred man to come back carrying more than a promise. The convoy reached Black Glass Quarry 43 minutes before the storm front crossed Granite Mercy Pass. Snow had already begun to thicken over the road, softening tire tracks almost as soon as they appeared. County patrol vehicles moved first, followed by the state animal health truck, 2 heated transport vans, and a utility vehicle carrying portable barriers, medical supplies, and emergency lighting. No sirens were used. Nolan Wexler had insisted on that before the first engine started. "These dogs have spent enough years learning that noise means something is about to happen to them," he had said. Now the convoy entered the quarry under dimmed headlights, the beams kept low against the falling snow. Cole sat beside Nolan in the county veterinary truck, one hand resting on the waterproof notebook inside his coat. Bram's intake number was written on the first page. Expected, not found, not safe. Expected. The word felt like a room with one light left on. At the gate, Gideon Rusk was waiting beneath the metal awning of the administration building. His steel-gray jacket was zipped precisely to the throat. Snow gathered on his shoulders, but his boots remained almost clean. 2 employees stood behind him. Neither looked at the arriving vehicles. Sheriff Ada Kincaid stepped out first and presented the warrant. Gideon read every line while the wind snapped the pages against her gloved hand. "This facility is licensed," he said. "The warrant does not dispute that," Ada replied. "You are interrupting a scheduled transfer." "We are examining whether that transfer is lawful." Gideon glanced toward the transport vans. "These dogs are being moved to approved placements." "Then the record should make that easy to verify." His eyes shifted briefly to Cole. Recognition came without surprise. "You came here under false pretenses." "I came here as a prospective adopter," Cole said. "You gave me a tour." You concealed your intentions." Cole looked beyond him toward the rear buildings. "So did you." Ada did not allow the exchange to continue. She assigned deputies to the office, server room, loading area, and vehicle bay. State inspectors began photographing seals, inventory boards, and transport documents before touching anything. The operation unfolded with less drama than Red Mercy might have imagined. No one kicked down doors. No one shouted commands across the yard. That restraint ended the moment the rear isolation building was opened. The front kennels had been prepared for inspection. Bedding was dry. Water bowls were full. Medication charts hung in plastic sleeves. A visitor could have left believing Northern Valor was underfunded, but responsible. The rear building smelled different. Not of obvious filth, of long confinement, stale disinfectant, old wool, damp concrete, and the sharp scent of dogs living with too little space between fear and sleep. The overhead fixtures gave weak yellow light. Several bulbs had burned out. In the coldest runs, thin skins of ice had formed along the rims of water bowls. Dogs rose as strangers entered. Others pressed themselves against the rear walls. One old Malinois turned in a tight circle, stopped, then began again. A black shepherd stared at the floor while trembling through its shoulders. Another dog barked once at the flashlight beam and then seemed ashamed of the sound. Nolan raised one hand. "Kill the portable lights?" A technician hesitated. "We need visibility. We need dogs who can still think." The brighter lamps were switched off. Staff used shielded headlamps angled toward the floor. Engines near the building were shut down. The sudden quiet was not complete, but it was gentler. That was when Dana Quill entered. She wore a petrol blue softshell and gray K9 training trousers with a dark teal treat pouch secured at her hip. At 48, Dana had the compact balance of someone who knew exactly where her feet were at all times. Her black hair was cut short, a silver streak clear at the left temple. She did not walk down the center aisle. She moved along the wall, body turned slightly sideways, never staring directly into a run. "Everybody stops opening gates until I say," she said. A deputy looked toward Ada. Ada nodded. Dana crouched several feet from the first kennel and tossed a piece of strongly scented food near the door. The dog inside did not approach. Dana waited. No coaxing, no repeated name. No hand pushed through the bars. "Fear is information," she said quietly. "It is not disobedience." Cole watched her work and understood why Helen had insisted on calling her. Dana did not treat calm as something to impose. She built enough space for each dog to choose it. The first animal came out after 9 minutes. The second required a soft visual barrier to block the sight of the crowded aisle. A third would not move until every person except Dana and Nolan stepped outside. Each dog received a temporary case number, chip scan, photograph, body condition score, and transport designation. The process was slow. The storm was not. Snow thickened against the high windows. Wind pushed loose powder beneath the loading doors. Nolan checked the time and said nothing. Near the exterior staging line, Warren Pike waited beside an official vehicle. His old Navy patrol coat was buttoned to the throat. The brass whistle at his chest remained untouched. He had followed every instruction. That seemed to cost him more than the cold. A technician emerged with a tablet. "We have a chip match," she said. "Havoc." Warren closed his eyes. Only for a moment. "Condition?" Nolan asked. "Underweight. Stiff in the right front foot. Alert, but he will not pass the kennel threshold." Dana looked toward Warren. "Does he know a nonverbal release cue?" Warren nodded. 2 fingers to the chest, then open palm. "Do not call loudly. Do not reach for him. Do not assume memory means readiness." "I know." Dana studied him. "Knowing changes when it is your dog." Warren accepted that without argument. He was permitted to stand outside the kennel building, several yards from the open door. Inside, Dana removed the visual barriers around Havoc's run. The old German shepherd stood in shadow. His coat was dark brown and black, his abdomen drawn up from lost weight. Silver marked his chin, and a pale triangular patch showed at the center of his chest. His left ear angled slightly outward. Warren did not say his name at first. He took the brass whistle from beneath his coat, but did not blow it. He simply held it where Havoc could see. The dog lifted its head. Warren turned his body sideways and lowered himself to one knee. His left shoulder dipped awkwardly, but he did not correct it. 2 fingers closed toward his chest. Then his palm opened. Havoc stared. Snow blew through the doorway between them. Nothing moved for so long that the people nearby began looking away, offering privacy to what might become disappointment. Then Havoc stepped forward. 1 pace, a pause, another. His right front paw landed unevenly, but he kept moving. Warren's mouth opened, yet no sound came. Havoc crossed the threshold and stopped beyond the reach of Warren's hands. Warren did not touch him. He repeated the signal. The shepherd closed the remaining distance and pressed his forehead against Warren's chest. Warren bent over the old dog without wrapping his arms around him. His hands hovered on either side, trembling, waiting. Only when Havoc leaned harder did Warren place one palm gently against his shoulder. "You got my letters," Warren whispered. No one corrected the impossible hope inside the sentence. Dana looked away first. Cole remained beside the building, the scene reaching somewhere beneath language. Reunion had often been imagined as noise, names shouted, bodies colliding, years erased in a single embrace. This was quieter. Nothing had been erased. Havoc remembered Warren, but he also remembered years without him. Trust returned one step at a time, carrying all of that history with it. The search for Bram began after the first transport van left for Red Mercy. Renee's map identified a separate isolation wing behind the main quarantine building. Its door required a second key not listed on the site access sheet. Gideon stood outside the office while a deputy inventoried his phone. Cole approached him. "Where is the isolation key?" Gideon glanced toward the rear yard. "Some of those dogs are there because they are dangerous. Some are there because they are old. You think those are mutually exclusive?" "No." That answer seemed to unsettle Gideon more than accusation would have. Cole continued. "The warrant includes every housing area. My attorney is reviewing the scope. The dogs are standing in a building without adequate heat, while your attorney reviews grammar." Gideon adjusted the edge of his cuff. For the first time, the gesture did not restore his composure. He made the call. It lasted less than 4 minutes. Afterward, Gideon removed a ring of keys from an inner pocket and handed it to Ada. He also wrote a server password on the back of a transport invoice. No confession followed, no plea for understanding, only surrender to a process he had delayed until delay itself became evidence. The isolation wing contained 6 dogs. Bram was in the final run. Cole recognized him from Aaron's photograph, though age had redrawn nearly every line. The shepherd had once been large. The structure remained in the breadth of his chest and the long bones of his legs, but time and poor care had reduced him. His muzzle was almost completely white. One eye remained dark and alert, the other had clouded to a pale gray. A small triangular notch marked the edge of his left ear. He lay on a thin mat, head raised. Nolan entered first to assess the kennel. "Do not open it yet," he said. "He is guarding the back corner." Cole looked past Bram. There was nothing there except an empty stainless steel bowl and a folded scrap of blanket. "He may have learned that corners are all he can keep," Dana said from behind them. Cole removed the old leather collar from inside his coat. Bram's nose moved. Not much. Enough? Cole crouched outside the gate and placed the collar on the concrete. The brass buckle clicked softly. Bram's ears shifted. Cole said nothing. Aaron's photograph had taught him that the old dog knew more from scent than explanation. Nolan opened the run but remained behind a soft shield. Bram struggled to stand. His hind legs shook. The right remained stiff, and his balance failed once before he steadied himself against the wall. Cole wanted to move toward him. Dana touched his shoulder. "Let the distance belong to him." Bram stepped to the collar. He lowered his head and breathed across the cracked leather. Then he lifted his muzzle toward Cole. The smell of Tundra was still on Cole's sleeves, woven into wool, dog hair, antiseptic, and the faint milk scent of the recovery room. Bram approached. He did not recognize Cole. That was clear, but recognition was not the only form of trust. The old dog pressed his nose into Cole's open palm. He remained there, breathing, while the rigid line of his tail loosened by a fraction. Cole closed no fingers around him. "You kept her company," he said. Bram's cloudy eye blinked. "Now she is waiting for you." The old shepherd allowed Nolan to place a support harness beneath his body. Together, without haste, they walked him into the snowlight. By the time the final records were secured, the storm had swallowed the quarry road beyond the first curve. State inspectors copied the server data while deputies sealed transport logs and medication cabinets. The digital records confirmed what the paper trail had suggested: false placements, unreported intake, recycled identification codes. Contracts accepted after staffing in veterinary capacity had already failed. Gideon stood beneath the awning as the dogs were loaded. Cole stopped beside him. "You knew their names," Cole said. Gideon's face tightened. "Names do not balance accounts." "No?" Cole looked toward Bram's transport crate. "They are what the accounts were for." Gideon said nothing. There was no satisfaction in leaving him behind, only the recognition that a man did not need to hate living creatures to destroy them. Sometimes he only needed to reduce them to columns long enough. The convoy descended toward Red Mercy in low gear. At the garage, Helen stood beneath the raised door, wearing her brick red parka. Heated intake lanes glowed behind her. Volunteers moved quietly between numbered stations. Each dog entered as a case, then became a name again. Havoc remained beside Warren during examination, still unwilling to be touched by anyone else. Bram was stabilized, warmed, and given pain medication. Nolan cleared him for a brief supervised reunion at the clinic before transfer to longer-term care. Cole rode beside his crate. Tundra was awake when they entered the recovery room. Her puppies slept in a small cluster behind her. She rose carefully. Bram stood at the opposite end of the room in his support harness. For several seconds, neither dog moved. Tundra's nose lifted first. Bram's good eye widened. They approached without sound. No dramatic rush, no cry of recognition. They met in the center of the warmed floor and searched each other through scent. Ear, cheek, shoulder, the old places where memory survived after sight and strength had faded. Bram touched the bent tip of Tundra's right ear. Tundra lowered her head beneath his neck. The old dog stood over her as long as his legs allowed. Cole did not know whether Bram had been a father, a guardian, or simply the one creature who had chosen to remain beside her when the doors kept closing. The distinction no longer seemed important. Tundra had not led Cole back to a secret. She had led him back to someone the world had recorded as gone. And beneath the clinic's soft lights, with snow covering every road beyond the windows, one erased name was finally answered. For 72 hours, the old military supply garage became the busiest building in Red Mercy. Then, just as quickly, it began to empty. The first dogs left in heated veterinary vehicles, bound for clinics in Helena and Bozeman. Others went to licensed sanctuaries with quiet acreage, reinforced fencing, and staff trained to care for former working dogs. Those with severe anxiety remained under specialized supervision, far from crowds and cameras. A small number were reunited with handlers whose identities had been verified through service records. No one called the process a happy ending. It was transportation, paperwork, medication schedules, behavior assessments, and difficult decisions made beneath fluorescent lights. Some dogs could not return to the people who had once loved them. Years had passed, homes had changed, other animals had arrived. A handler's longing did not automatically create a suitable placement. Dana Quill repeated that truth so often that Cole began hearing it before she spoke. "History is not consent," she told a former contractor who insisted an aging Malinois still belonged with him. "The dog gets a vote." The man left angry. The dog remained calm. Cole learned that those two facts could exist together without requiring him to fix either one. At the end of the third day, county officials removed the final temporary barriers. The portable heaters went back to the fire department. Volunteers carried out bags of laundry and sealed medical waste. The concrete floor showed pale rectangles where crates had stood. Cole remained after everyone left. The garage had not been silent for 3 days. Now the returning quiet felt different from the quiet he had cultivated before. It was not empty. It held traces. A strip of blue tape marked Intake Lane 2. A handwritten feeding chart remained pinned crookedly beside the utility sink. One knitted sweater from the well-intended box had somehow ended up hanging over a pipe wrench. Cole took it down. The sweater was bright yellow, sized for a dog no larger than a loaf of bread. He folded it and placed it on the workbench instead of throwing it away. Helen entered through the side door carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You missed a sanitation inspection," she said. "I attended 6. "You stood near 6. "That is attendance." She handed him 1 cup. "You're adapting poorly to civilian definitions." Outside, the storm had passed. Moonlight lay across the snow in long blue bands. Helen walked to the center of the garage and turned slowly, taking in the overhead crane, the storage bays, the old maintenance pit, and the rows of shelves built for equipment no longer used. "Aaron's plan would fit here," she said. Cole did not answer. She set her coffee on the workbench and opened the canvas notebook. The pages contained measurements, rough budgets, intake questions, and sketches for a facility that had never existed. Aaron's drawing was crude. The isolation area had no drainage plan. The exercise yard was too narrow. He had forgotten storage for medical supplies and underestimated every cost by at least half. Cole found comfort in the mistakes. They made the plan human. "We should continue it," Helen said. "No." The answer came too fast. Helen closed the notebook. "You have not heard the proposal." "I know the proposal." "You assume you do?" "You want to turn the garage into a memorial." Helen's expression tightened. "That is not what I said." "You will name it after Aaron. People will donate because of Aaron. Every article will call it his final mission." "And that would offend you?" "It would use him." The garage lights hummed above them. Cole placed the untouched coffee beside hers. "The dead become convenient," he said. "They cannot object when the living turn them into symbols." Helen studied him for a long moment. Then she opened the notebook again and tore out the page bearing Aaron's name. Cole stared at her. Helen folded the paper once and placed it in her coat pocket. "There," she said. "Now it is not Aaron's center." The sharpness in her voice had nothing theatrical in it. It belonged to years of listening to others describe her husband as brave, noble, selfless, fallen, as though a handful of honorable words could replace the man who left socks beside the bed and burned eggs every Sunday. "Memory is not a plaque, Cole," she said. "It is not a name over a door. It is building something decent enough that it does not require a miracle every time a living creature needs help." Cole looked at the empty intake lanes. The rescue had succeeded because Renee risked speaking. Dale stopped protecting his silence. Marjorie recognized a false signature. Warren remembered a name. Dana respected fear. Nolan created order, and an entire town accepted that assistance did not always mean crossing the fence. No single hero had saved the dogs. The thought unsettled him, then relieved him. "What happens when funding ends?" he asked. "We plan before opening." "When a dog cannot be placed?" "We provide long-term care or work with a facility that can." "When veterans come expecting a dog to repair them?" "We disappoint them professionally." Cole looked at her. Helen picked up her coffee. "I am very good at that." A small sound escaped him before he could prevent it. Not quite laughter. Enough. They began with a feasibility study. 6 months later, the garage looked as though 2 different buildings were negotiating a truce. The original steel beams remained. So did Cole's workbench, the overhead crane, and the broad doors facing the snow road. But the rear section now contained insulated kennels, floor drains, quiet ventilation, and a medical room with washable walls. Dale supervised construction. He arrived before sunrise in his brown canvas jacket, carrying blueprints under one arm and a yellow tape measure clipped to his belt. He refused payment beyond fuel costs and argued with every contractor who attempted to hide poor workmanship beneath the phrase, "good enough." "Good enough built the quarry," he said once. No one used the phrase again. Helen established medical protocols, vaccination rules, medication tracking, quarantine standards, and emergency transfer agreements with 3 clinics. Dana created behavior plans that were longer than the original adoption contracts. Each dog had separate thresholds for handling, noise, visitors, equipment, and contact with other animals. Some needed structured activity. Some needed stillness. Some needed to live out their remaining years without ever being asked to perform another useful act. Eleanor Voss arrived during the 7th month and immediately removed 3 chairs from Cole's office. The 60-year-old attorney had served in the Air Force before building a career in nonprofit and veterans law. She wore her silver hair in a precise bob, carried an oxblood document case, and regarded sentimentality as a substance best handled with gloves. "You have arranged the room so every visitor faces your desk," she said. "It is an office." "It is a small kingdom." She turned the desk sideways and placed the chairs in a circle. Cole watched this unauthorized restructuring with narrowed eyes. Eleanor ignored him. "No organization should depend on one wounded man being noble forever," she said. "I did not say I was noble." "Excellent. That saves us time." She created an independent board, conflict of interest rules, financial reporting, insurance coverage, and a procedure allowing staff to overrule Cole on medical or behavioral decisions. Cole disliked the last provision, which, Eleanor informed him, proved its necessity. The center was named Mercy Line Working Dog and Veteran Recovery Center. Aaron's name appeared nowhere on the sign. His notebook remained in a locked archive cabinet with copies of the original planning documents, not as scripture, but as evidence that the idea had begun imperfectly and required many people to make it responsible. The center opened with 4 resident dogs. Bram was one of them. His arthritis improved with medication, hydrotherapy, and heated flooring. His right hind leg remained stiff, and his cloudy eye did not recover, but he gained weight and learned the timing of every meal. Most afternoons he slept beneath the south-facing window, where sunlight warmed the pale fur along his muzzle. Tundra often rested nearby. Her 3 puppies had grown into long-legged, oversized-pawed adolescents who treated dignity as a rule designed for older dogs. One stole Dana's glove during a behavior seminar and carried it directly to Bram, who looked at the offering with deep disappointment. Tundra did not become a therapy dog. Dana rejected the suggestion before anyone finished making it. "She has spent enough of her life being assigned a purpose by humans," she said. After the puppies were weaned and Tundra's health stabilized, Dana evaluated her over several months. Tundra tolerated selected dogs through barriers and occasionally chose to rest near anxious newcomers. On other days, she walked away. Both choices were respected. Her greatest achievement was not helping other dogs. It was sleeping deeply while someone opened a door. Renee Calder testified in the state investigation, submitted the files she had copied, and accepted responsibility for the months she had remained silent. She was not immediately given a job at Mercy Line. Helen required training. Dana required more training. Eleanor required background checks, written references, and an interview conducted by someone Renee had never met. Renee completed every step. When she finally joined the staff, she wore a navy vest with her name stitched above the pocket and an orange carabiner holding the kennel keys. Before opening any run, she spoke the dog's name and waited for acknowledgement. June Hollowell continued publishing reports. Her first article described the rescue. Her second examined the contracting system that allowed K9s to disappear after transfer. Her third questioned whether Mercy Line could remain financially stable without turning suffering into publicity. Cole read that one twice. Then he sent her the center's audited budget. June replied with a single sentence, "Better than a photograph of you holding a puppy." Warren and Havoc became the center's first verified reunion. It was not a simple return home. For several weeks, Warren visited under Dana's supervision. Havoc relearned the layout of his house through short visits. Warren removed loose rugs, built a ramp, and stopped inviting neighbors over without warning. On the day Havoc moved in permanently, Warren stood at the center door with the brass whistle resting against his chest. "You coming to inspect us every week?" he asked Dana. "Twice a week?" "That seems excessive." "It is." Warren nodded. "Good." The legal case against Gideon moved slowly. Fraud, unlawful transport, falsified records, welfare violations. His actions became part of a wider review involving contractors in several states. New rules were proposed requiring verified final placement, ongoing reporting, and financial responsibility after working dogs left service. Cole followed the updates without satisfaction. Gideon mattered, but blaming only Gideon would have allowed every organization that paid him to take difficult dogs away to claim innocence. Mercy Line could not repair the entire system. It could refuse to become another place where responsibility disappeared behind a receipt. Cole and Helen learned to work beside each other without mistaking cooperation for forgiveness. They argued over budgets, quarantine capacity, volunteer training, and Cole's habit of scheduling 3 repairs during hours reserved for sleep. Helen left coffee on his workbench most mornings. Cole cleared snow from the clinic entrance before she arrived. Neither mentioned these things. One dawn in late winter, Helen found him outside Mercy Line, adjusting the latch on the exercise yard gate. "You repaired that yesterday?" she said. "It moved in the cold." It did not. Cole tightened the bolt anyway. Helen stood beside him, looking toward the mountains. "You stayed," she said. He stopped working. There were many possible answers. None felt honest enough. So Cole nodded. Helen did not tell him that the past was forgiven. She only handed him the second cup of coffee. By the time the doors officially opened, winter had returned to Red Mercy in full brightness. Snow lay clean across the valley. The sky was a fierce Montana blue, and sunlight poured through the wide garage windows. A small group of veterans walked the cleared path beside selected dogs. Some held leashes. Others walked several feet away while staff handled the animals. One man sat on a bench without speaking while an old Labrador slept at the opposite end. No one pushed them closer. Bram rested in his square of sunlight beneath the window. Tundra sat beside Cole near the open door. Her black saddle gleamed against her honey gold coat, and the bent tip of her right ear moved with every new sound. The 3 young shepherds chased one another through low snowbanks until Renee called them back from the parking area. Above the entrance hung The new sign. Mercy line. No hero's name. No promise of miracles. Only a line meant to hold when other systems failed. Cole watched the people and dogs move at their separate paces. Once he had believed the most important duty of a soldier was to bring everyone home alive. He still believed that mattered. But survival was only an arrival. It did not teach a body to sleep through an opening door. It did not restore a name erased from a record. It did not persuade the wounded that peace was more than a temporary failure of danger. Those things required repetition, food at the same hour, hands that stopped when fear asked them to stop, records that followed a dog instead of losing it, people who returned the next morning. Tundra leaned lightly against Cole's leg. Across the room, Helen looked up from a medical chart. She did not smile. She did not need to. Cole rested his hand against Tundra's neck and looked through the open doors at the white road stretching beyond Red Mercy. He had spent years thinking home was the place a person reached after the mission ended. Now he understood that home was something built afterward, a place safe enough that living souls no longer had to run, a place honest enough to let them choose whether to stay. Sometimes the greatest wrong is not done by cruel hands, but by good people who keep looking away. Cole, Helen, and Tundra remind us that compassion becomes meaningful only when it is followed by responsibility. We may not be able to save every wounded life, but we can choose to notice, to speak, and to remain when walking away would be easier. May God give us the courage to protect what has been entrusted to us, and the wisdom to build kindness that lasts. Share in the comments what this story meant to you, and subscribe for more journeys of loyalty, healing, and second chances.